Right. So look, what's going on? The woke are coming, apparently, Emma.
Yes, so this is from a really large piece of research done by the legendary pollster Frank Luntz for the Centre for Policy Studies. And as I say, this is a mammoth study, so there were lots of findings. But one of the most interesting findings was I suppose you would say, the prevalence of what he calls wokeism amongst the young. And the way that he understands this from these focus groups that he's done and polling surveys with the entire population, trying to really get inside the minds of the British public. On the one hand, he found actually that many people don't even know what woke is. They've never heard of cancel culture. It's not something that's keeping them awake at night in the way that perhaps it's keeping many of us awake at night, or as knowledgeable as perhaps talk radio listeners might be, because we discuss these things all the time. But one of the most interesting findings is that amongst the young, these views are particularly prevalent. So when he's talking about what he calls wokeism, he means this idea that sort of views all aspects of our society and history as being based on exploitation, discrimination, and so on, and views the present generation as being almost co-conspirators and this is the way that he describes it himself, as being co-conspirators in the exploitation of generations past, even centuries ago. And he found that amongst the young, this was particularly prevalent. So I've got some of the stats here, and apparently 57% of 18 to 29-year-olds believe that the country is institutionally racist and discriminatory.
Jolly good.
And that was obviously much higher than amongst the rest of the population. But what was also very interesting when it comes to the implications for people's relationships with each other, he found that 28% of people had stopped talking to someone because of online or in person because of their political views. But amongst 18 to 29-year-olds, this was 52%. So more than half of 18 to 29-year-olds have actually stopped talking to someone.
But they're institutionally idiotic then, aren't they? You know, they're talking to us about being institutionally racist. And this is for my money what you get with the slow drip of relentless indoctrination that comes from the things of being taught critical race theory in schools, being told constantly that different things are institutionally racist, being told about unconscious bias. This is the effect that it has on it, where now you breed a generation of people who essentially hate this country, Emma.
Yeah, and he found actually that that amongst young people, the perception that the country is institutionally racist was higher than amongst the non-white population. And he puts this down to education. This is something that people are being taught, and so they've come to believe it rather than it actually being part of their own experience of life in Britain. And so his warning really coming from America, where, as we've seen, the political fabric of America is being completely torn apart between this war between right-wing populism and left-wing wokeism, and that's the way that he frames it. That the social fabric has really been torn apart in the United States, and he is really almost like a prophet, bringing us a warning that we need to be hyper vigilant, that we don't lose the civility that we have left in our political debate and don't become as divided as America, because he found, as many of us would expect, that voters are now thinking more along cultural lines than previously we would have been thinking along economic lines.
Absolutely, and it's the suspension of logic that goes with that as well now, isn't it? So you look at, for example, likes of Joe Biden in America, who tries to bracket himself as America is back. I'm all for decency and common sense and the common good and love and tolerance, while simultaneously being a deeply intolerant individual at the helm of a deeply intolerant party that looks to cancel everyone who disagrees with him. And by the way, I'm not saying that all of the Republicans there are squeaky clean in that respect, let's be honest. But we certainly don't want that here, do we? Where we become so divided and so hateful towards each other. And that stat that you read out earlier about people getting cancelled for their political views or indeed just thoughts, really, I think is staggering, because this is a world where I'm very worried of that we're living in. You know, people who you've been friends with for your entire life. I mean, I've had it with friends that I'd known for years, and I was actually genuinely quite upset about some of this, where I'd have a lot of discussions with them about why I was personally voting for Brexit. And whilst one of those elements of it was immigration policy and the control of our borders, that was just one of a number of reasons why I wanted to vote for Brexit. And yet, the amount of times that they would turn around and even just joke to me, some kind of half meaning it, well, you're voting for Brexit because you're a racist. And you think, actually, we just can't get through to these people a lot of the time, and they kind of want to cancel you for these views. I'm just quite worried that that's where we're heading, especially with the younger generation, you know?
Yeah, and I think that was what he was warning about as well. He said when he does focus groups in the UK, he finds that Conservative and Labour voters are still able to have conversations with each other, whereas in the US, when he does focus groups, he said that it's only a matter of minutes before it completely breaks down and they just start attacking each other. And this is a point when it comes to what you're describing there, when people cut other people off because of their political views. I had friends of mine who still to this day won't talk to me because of my views over Brexit, because I voted Leave, and at no point did they even ask me why I had chosen to vote in that way, or why those were my views. They just make assumptions on the basis of your sort of voting or your political beliefs, and don't ask you why you hold those views. So I think what he's really warning is that we need to make sure that we, as he says, he's obviously a real Anglophile. He actually has been doing some interviews with shoes with a Union Jack football shoes or trainers on. He's a real sort of lover of Britain, and he talks about the values that we have of civility, of tolerance, of respect in conversations, and the way that we conduct ourselves being very different from the way the Americans do. And I think he's really trying to really warn us so that we don't end up in a situation where these conversations can't take place, because I think we are really at that point now where reasonable conversations have become impossible.
Yeah, I agree with you completely, and it's such a sad fact, but it's so true, and I can't help but feel like it's being perpetuated by people in our education system, by people in office workspaces as well, who make their employees go and sit through. I've got someone who works in a law firm. There's absolutely no need for them to have to do this whatsoever, but they do. They have to go and do a 2-day course on unconscious bias training, where actually there's no nuance involved with that discussion whatsoever. You're told that you're unconsciously biased, and that you are, whether you like it or not, a frothing racist, and that you actually have to bow down now and apologise to everything. What kids are being taught in schools, and what news companies as well, a lot of the time, let's be honest with you, not here at Talk Radio, but a lot of news companies do. They indoctrinate people because they feel as though they're tripping over themselves to be the most in support of Black Lives Matter movement, the most in support of Pride Month, the most in support of this. Because if they're not, then the theory that they see is that they might actually be deemed to be racist or something. And I am concerned about the fact that we're perpetuating these divisions in society. But Emma, just before I let you get going, obviously one of the discussions that we had yesterday was on English patriotism in light of the fact that we've got to the Euros, and I think it ties in a little bit with what we're saying here now. Are you glad to see patriotism spilling out onto the streets? Because for a while I do feel like we've been tearing ourselves apart as a nation, and now we've got an excuse to put that St George's flag up and wave it in Emily Thornberry's face.
I think something really wonderful is happening actually with patriotism. I think can't imagine we would have seen a Labour leader or even figures on the left sitting by the St George's
there'd be the Palestine
flag
there instead, wouldn't there?
It's and actually during the Denmark game, I was watching from the pub, and the atmosphere in the streets was absolutely electric. And I'm sure that I don't know if this is the result of lockdown or if this is something else is in the zeitgeist that is a very sort of like positive patriotism. But we've seen there's a campaign at #EnglandTogether with people from all sorts of backgrounds uniting behind the flag, putting an emphasis on sort of a civic patriotism, reclaiming that sort of imagery from accusations of it being associated with the far right and things like that. I think it's really positive. I love seeing people being so proud of their country and being willing to wave the flag. And I think it's really sad that so many people, as we saw one particular QC on Twitter saying that we're trying to remind everyone that the three lions are French, as if to say there are some people who are still, it's almost as if they want to say to us, you are not allowed to be proud of your team. And actually those people who keep pointing out the ethnic background of the team, it almost seems to be insinuating that they think that makes them somehow not really English, but actually everybody's really proud of what the team has accomplished. And I think it's sad that some people want to try and turn that into something negative and into something culture warsy.
Absolutely. Well, I'm waiting for the day that you run for office. I mean, you will certainly have my vote. Don't worry about that. Emma Webb, their social commentator, reacting to the warning coming from our friends overseas that wokeism is on its way and it may be here to stay.